by me. A couple of other norms. Just if you have questions and you're joining via computer, if you can use the chat, that would be great. If you're joining by phone or if chat isn't working for you, you can definitely unmute and ask a question. Chances are I will cover many of your questions. So I'll ask that you, again, try to put them in the chat or wait until a little bit later. I've got a lot of information to throw at you. So for those of you who don't know me, haven't seen me in this virtual landscape, I'm Amanda Giordano. I'm the school counselor at Nettlehurst. So we're gonna just jump right in. So this is the high school application process. It's created for 8th grade, so I've tried to take all of the specifics out because like the dates won't apply. I've left some of the months, but if there are little things here and there like the fall 2020 on this, just ignore. But Go CPS is the, it's a website and it's also the application that's sorry about that. Internet decided just to stop. Let me get the, actually it says that it's still presenting. Can read for you. Okay, so it doesn't look like it's popped through yet. Can you all see my screen? Ah, there it goes. We're just lagging. Okay. So once again, Go CPS, it is the online platform that you can use to research schools and apply come 8th grade, or maybe some of you have had, you've applied for academic centers for elementary school, and so you might have familiarity with the website. Alan, I see you've got your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Not anymore.
Okay. So one of the things, like I just mentioned, you may have used the website to apply for elementary schools. So if you do use the Go CPS website to apply or to research, you'll notice that it lists all of the school options, not just high school. So you will have to filter out the elementary schools to see just the high schools when you're doing that research. It is used also for the pre-K programs as well. So our application phases. Right now, you're in the learn phase. So you are all learning about everything that is to come next year. Research, I think learn and research, I don't know why the district separates them the way it does, but I think that you're also in the research phase right now. I don't think it's ever too early to start researching what your options are because there are so many of them. Research, more personalized research can happen in the fall. That's when most schools have open houses And so you can, if we're back in person, it's safe enough, they can have open houses again. You can actually go and explore the schools, meet students and staff. I think the schools did a pretty good job thinking on their feet this year for some virtual events. So there will be some way to explore in the future, even if we're not in person. And then you apply between October and December of 8th grade, and you get the entire window. There's no early bird gets the worm type of situation. So you don't have a better chance. Oh boy, dog almost fell off the desk. You don't have a better chance of applying or getting a seat if you apply the day the application opens in October versus if you wait to submit until the end of the application period in mid-December. The other thing is when it sounds really final when you say submit or when you say apply, but it's actually a very flexible application, and you can make changes to the application even after you've submitted. So I generally encourage getting into the website and applying earlier just to get a feel for it, and then you can make changes as much as you need to all the way until the application closes. And then selection happens spring, usually late March. This year they haven't said when they're going to release offers, but in the last 2 years it has been right around when spring break happens. So applying in October, you'll hear me talk about applying to programs as opposed to applying to schools. And that's because within a school, there might be several different programs. So there's an example here of a school that has 3 different programs. They have a world language program, a fine and performing arts program, and an information technology program. So that would mean that your application you wouldn't be just applying to, we'll say I use Linkin Park as an example because a lot of our students are interested. So you wouldn't be applying just to Linkin Park. You would have to choose which of the 5 programs you're interested in and your child is eligible for. So just want to explain that programs versus schools right away. So then when it comes to the different program types, there are a bunch of different categories. And so I think one of the nice things and also overwhelming things about the high school process is that there are so many options. And so the one thing to remember though is that you always have a spot at your neighborhood school, even if you don't apply. You can just show up, residents, and they will register you, just like you can do at Nettlehurst. So it will be a seat in the general education program of that school. So for instance, Linkin Park, if you live in the neighborhood for Linkin Park, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed a seat, your child's guaranteed a seat in the drama program, right? That's still is a separate application, but your child is guaranteed a seat in the general education program with access to their honors classes and things like that. So just to keep in mind, as we think about other programs, always got your neighborhood school. So CPS divides them into 2 categories. You've got choice programs, which is basically just everything except for selective enrollment, and then selective enrollment. So all 11 of the selective enrollment schools are listed right there. The ones that our students generally are interested in, mainly because of proximity, are Jones, Lane, Peyton a little bit, Whitney Young, and then Northside College Prep. We generally have a couple apply to every year. As you can see for the choice programs, we've got the neighborhoods. And I'm back. It's not usually this bad, I apologize. It's not in my control, but here we are. So magnet schools, they usually have a program that is a specialty. There's lots of fine and performing arts magnet programs. You've got CTE, which is career and technical education. Could be anything from pre-engineering to pre-law to health science. There are military schools, international baccalaureate schools, and charter schools to round out that list. We won't be talking about private schools. That is a very specific process dependent on each school. And I know a little bit about some of that process, and that can be an offline talk if it's something that you're interested in. So to give a quick overview of the different types, as I mentioned, you're always guaranteed a seat at your neighborhood school. They do have attendance boundaries. Oftentimes, students can apply to Okay, I'm back again. Thank you for your patience. Maybe I may have been better off staying at school for this. All right, moving on from neighborhood school, we've got our magnet schools and magnet programs. So some of them have attendance boundaries, some of them don't. I'll show you later on where you can find that information pretty easily. Do you need an application? It varies. Sometimes the neighborhood students do automatically get a seat. Others require an application. A lot of this is spelled out really clearly for you in 8th grade once accounts are activated. So it seems a little overwhelming now, but I'll show you where you can start doing this research, and then just know that it'll be a lot easier to figure this all out once application time gets closer. So magnet schools and programs they select students either by random lottery or points, and we'll talk about that more later. And then sometimes there's an admission screening. Art programs always have them. That would be an audition for drama, or for a music program, it would be a portfolio review for a visual arts program. So just so you're aware. And then career and technical education, again, some of them have attendance boundaries and will automatically admit students from the neighborhood. Some don't, and so every student has to apply even if they live in the neighborhood. You do have to apply to get into these programs, and most of them are actually, I think it's been changing a little bit. They're either random lottery or points based on academic achievement, but there aren't any other hoops to jump through, no other admission screenings for the CTE programs. There are also military academies. They are they're college prep programs. They're focused on leadership. They don't mean that a student has to continue on into the military. They don't have attendance boundaries, so every student has to apply to be admitted. They're accepted based on points from academic achievement, and then also from some materials that are completed during an information session that is generally required. It wasn't required this year because of the pandemic, but that includes then a survey and an essay at the information session. And then students get points from that, also points from their academic achievement, and then students are selected. International Baccalaureate schools, they are, it's a standardized curriculum that's used globally. They have their own theory, their own approach to education. And even CPS is expanding its IB offerings. More and more schools are adopting the curriculum, and so they're even adopting within IB. There are a couple of different pathways, a couple of different program options available, and so it depends on which school, what types of IB programs they have. Some of them are career program, and so students might get introduced to like engineering, for instance, at Amundsen. And then the others are just like the standard IB diploma program. It's a little bit bigger, the scope of that is a little bit bigger than what we're talking about here, but we can talk more if you have questions about IB, or the IB organization has a website with lots of information. And again, it's standardized, so whatever's on the IB website is going to match up pretty well with what's going on in the high schools. The only admission screening is, in normal times, attending an information session. And it's not even really a screening, it's just more of a check mark. This year that was waived, but in years past, if a student did not attend an information session, even if they had the academic achievement points to be admitted, they weren't offered a seat. So it is selection based on academic achievement, but you have to have attended that information session in a normal year, not this year for our 8th graders. And then we have charter schools, which are, you know, privately owned, but part of CPS. Every charter school is now part of the Go CPS application process. Most of the time, it's just random lottery for selection, and sometimes they will give preference for siblings. They don't tend to have admission screenings, and they do all require applications. And then the last category is selective enrollment. These are college prep, really rigorous schools. I kind of call them like the Ivy Leagues of CPS. The standard is honors courses, and then as many AP beyond that as a student qualifies for. You do require an application. There are no attendance boundaries, so there's no neighborhood situation. The selection is based on points from academic achievement and admission screening. So there's a separate selective enrollment test that students have to take during their 8th grade year. So I'll pause there just to see if there are any questions about the types of programs. I'm going to talk more, next I'm going to talk more about selection and what all of these things about points and lottery mean. But any questions on choice versus selective enrollment programs or anything so far?
Okay, this is Richard Velasquez mom, and about the selective enrollment. I know there is a test we had to present for that school. Do you know the dates?
They don't release those until fall. Usually, though, it's offered from November through February.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that test until 8th graders.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
That's right. Yeah. Good question. All right. Oh yeah, one more. This isn't necessarily a category that you'll see in most CPS literature, but there's this initiative, I suppose you call it, called Grow Community, and it was formed to just create a nice K through 12 pipeline within neighborhoods. And so there are, I think it's 18 elementary schools that have this relationship with Amundsen and Lakeview that gives our students preference for selection. So, I mean, for us at Nettlehorst, most of our students, their neighborhood school is Lakeview already, so they're guaranteed that seat. But if you're a student who got in by applying, because not all of our students, we're not just a neighborhood school, we're also a magnet school. So if you're a student you're a family who lives in a different neighborhood, just because your student goes to Nettlehorst, they are also guaranteed a seat at Lakeview High School, even though that's not their neighborhood high school. And so for those of you who do live in the Lakeview neighborhood, and Lakeview would be your neighborhood school anyway, you also have Amundsen as an option. So all of our students, every student who attends Nettlehorst has priority preference at Amundsen and Lakeview. Amundsen has grown significantly in the last couple of years. And so it used to be that this partnership meant a guaranteed seat. but they're reaching their capacity. And so it now means a preference. So just so you're aware of that, but those are two options. No extra admission screening. And again, this is for a seat in the general education program. Lakeview is if they don't have separate programs, Amundsen does have an IB program. And so the Grow community, if you apply through that, it would be for a seat in the general education program, not the IB program. But they're really good. The coordinators of their IB program came and spoke to the school counselors, and they said that they keep an eye out for students in the Grow track. And if they show academic potential, they will invite them over to the IB program. So I thought that was good to know. I did see a question about how many times you could take the selective enrollment test. It is just once. So when it comes to applying, we've got all of these different options. And remember, we're talking about applying to programs, not high schools. So that means even more options. So you can apply. It's one application. It's a little confusing because they've worked with what technology they have, what systems they have. And so it looks like it's just one application, but really behind the scenes, it's like two applications in one. So you get to apply for up to 20 choice programs and 6 selective enrollment schools. So you can theoretically apply to up to 26 different options. You'll rank your choices from favorite number 1 down, and then when the offers come out in late March, at most a student can get 1 offer from each category, choice and selective enrollment. So that means that a student could have 3 different options. They could have a choice program offer, they could have an offer to a selective enrollment school, and then they'll always have their neighborhood school. So I like that this kind of visually tracks how that all works. But again, it's a single offer from each category type of system, and you can have anywhere from 0 to 2 offers. And then if you do get an offer from each program or from each type, from each category, it's up to you to choose. So you get 2 weeks to make that decision. You have to manually accept. So stop there and answer any questions about this. I know this can be a little confusing, and then I saw some questions in the chat. So MAP testing, as a standardized test, it has a set window that it has to occur. So the spring MAP test always has to happen between May and June. I tried looking for the specific dates for this year, and I didn't find them. I spent a couple minutes on it. I could, or maybe if I really dug, I could have found them, but it's generally May to June. And we at Nettlehurst try to schedule our 7th graders as late into that window as possible, usually like that first week of June, just so they have as much learning under their belt as they can, because we know how important this test is. Honestly, I think that testing will happen this year. That district ended up offering testing to 8th graders this year because they hadn't had a new score since the middle of 7th grade. So we have a test administration under our belt during the pandemic times, and that happened when we were full remote. So now that we're going to be hybrid, I personally, this is just my opinion, I don't think that there's any way that CPS could get away with not offering testing this spring, at least for our 7th graders. So then theoretically, that if you choose to enroll in a test prep course, it should line up so that it ends right before that testing window, or right as that testing window starts. As for recommending prep courses, I don't necessarily recommend them. I think that there are a lot of variables involved. That the courses generally go over all of the material that they should have been learning already. And so it's a refresher, a review. They do a little bit of test taking strategy. They do give like a diagnostic test at the beginning to see what each student needs to work on a little bit more. But there was a panel, I don't know if any of you were able, or if your kids were able to attend, there was a panel hosted by current selective enrollment students a couple months ago, and several of them said that they used Khan Academy and No Red Ink to refresh, and they felt pretty good. I know not every kid has the self-control to sit down and actually go through that. Some really feel better, having someone guide them through, review. So it's entirely up to you and your students' strengths and needs. And also, I know they're really expensive. So I know some companies do like a Map-a-Palooza type deal where it's just a morning, like a couple hours one morning to get some test taking and things like that. And those are usually a little bit more reasonably priced. So those are my thoughts. All right, so selection. And I actually, now that I'm thinking about this, I didn't talk about eligibility. So there are all of these options, but there's also, many schools have eligibility requirements. So to be able to apply, students need to meet certain criteria. So these are going to be for those schools that are point-based selection. There's usually some kind of related eligibility criteria. So let me explain a little bit more about selection, and then I'll backstep to the eligibility. So for choice programs, as you heard me talking through the different choice options, you have lottery, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's totally computerized, totally random, and they just fill seats until all the seats are filled. Or there are point-based systems. There can sometimes be priority factors, like if you have a sibling that attends, that increases your odds. It might give you extra points if you live nearby. So for instance, Linkin Park, if you live in the neighborhood, as I said, you don't automatically get admission to their drama program. You still have to apply, but you do get a point bonus for being a neighborhood student. Continuing enrollment, for instance, the selective enrollment schools, some of them have academic centers for 7th and 8th grade. So you actually just get funneled up. Some other schools, it might be that you get some extra points because you attended the elementary program related to the high school. So you can see what the other ones are here. Tiers are, the city has tried to make the application process equitable, and it realizes that there is a correlation between neighborhood resources via income and academic achievement. And so they sometimes, and I'll give selective enrollment as the example, because that's the one that I know the most about. They will divide the applicants into tiers and then just compare those applicants to each other. So there are 4 tiers. Tier 4 is the highest socioeconomic standing, and then tier 1 is the lowest. And so most of the Nutlehurst neighborhood is tier 4. So when it comes time to enroll or to apply for, let's say, selective enrollment, let's say you're applying to Lane, they're going to look at all of the, they fill 30% of the seats with the highest scores, no matter what, no matter where you live. And then they set aside a certain number of seats for each tier. So they compare all the tier 4 students to each other and take the highest scores. They compare all the tier 3 students to each other and take those with the highest scores, and so on. That way every tier is represented, and then that way the students from tier 1 aren't competing against the students in tier 4, because like when we think about Nutlehurst, we have families who make amazing contributions that pay for staff positions, so our class sizes can be smaller and things like that. And when you consider other neighborhoods that don't have those means, it can have an effect on academic achievement. So it's the city's way of trying to equalize that and provide opportunity. So it says that it plays out in some choice programs. I'm not familiar with which ones, but it'll be labeled where it's applicable. So then when it comes to the point system, those points can come from all of the factors that are listed here on the left. NWEA map test scores, generally that is the score from the end of 7th grade. So that May-June test date that I was mentioning, that's usually the score that's used. This year was different because of the pandemic. And then the final 7th grade grades, that's the average for the whole year for the 4 core subjects, reading, math, science, and social science. If there's an admission screening, there will be points from that. Again, if there are any points for geographical preference, and then if there are any points from essays or recommendations. I will say recommendations are not common. I can only think of 2 program types with I think only 3 programs that require recommendations. So some of those same factors, and this is where I'm going to backpedal to eligibility, some of those same factors are used for eligibility. So a program might say that a student has to have at least a 3.5 GPA and an NWEA MAP score in the 48th percentile in math and reading or higher just to be able to apply. So this is why I always stress the importance of 7th grade. I stress it with the kids, and the teachers do. You have to really be on your game all year, be doing the best that you can, because what you're doing now is going to directly affect what your options are. So the other thing about eligibility is that it can be misleading. So just because your child is eligible to apply doesn't mean that they have a huge chance of getting selected. So we'll talk about cutoff scores in a little while, but the eligibility criteria just to be able to apply are not the same as the selection criteria. So, and that's a conversation that we can have more in depth. I end up having this conversation a lot every day through fall, so we can talk about that. And then there's a nice little visual about lottery. We all know how lotteries work. So then the selection process for selective enrollment, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's point-based, and then it's also broken down by tier, so that just within each tier, you're selected based on points. Those points come from the NWEA MAP test scores, generally the spring of 7th grade, the final 7th grade grades, again, that's the cumulative average for the whole year, and then points from the selective enrollment exam. They are evenly weighted for selective enrollment, so it's 300 points for the test score, up to 300 points for the test scores, up to 300 points for grades, and then up to 300 points for that selective enrollment exam. Then, when it comes to offers, there are a couple of different rounds. So first round, the offers come out, again, late March, and then you get 2 weeks to accept. So that means it rolls into April a little bit. The reason that there's such a gap between when applications are due, which is mid-December, until offers are issued, is because the high schools need that whole time to be doing all of these admission screenings. So they need to be, administering the selective enrollment exam. They need to be, and then they need to score everything, and then the scores need to be inputted. So I know it feels like a really long wait, but when you've got students that are testing and auditioning all the way until February, it makes sense. So then there's actually a second round of applications that happens in April, May. The only schools and programs that are in that round are the ones who haven't filled all their seats yet. So as you can imagine, there aren't a ton of options, but it's something, and you never know. For some reason this year, there were actually a lot of arts programs. I don't know if it's just that they didn't have enough applicants that met their scores or what, but round 2 exists. It's not a guarantee, and then those offers are released in June to July. And then for those who maybe don't get an offer to a school that, not saying not getting an offer at all, but maybe you don't get an offer to the school or the program that you're interested in, they do have wait lists. So that wait list opens in May for round 1, and it opens in June for round 2, and it actually continues all the way through to February of freshman year. So let's say you list Alcott General Education as your number 1, and you put Linkin Park Drama as your number 2. You don't get the seat at Alcott because it's not a very big school, so they don't have many seats to give out. You automatically get put on their wait list, and then perhaps you ended up getting that offer to Linkin Park. As people accept or decline offers, seats become available. And so they start to go to the wait list to fill seats. And so those offers are actually given via phone. The school will contact you directly, as opposed to the regular offers. Those are all online. So you log into your account and see what offers are there. Okay, I think I'm back. Any questions? Okay, so resources. Again, I think the most important thing that you can be doing right now is researching. Look to see what the options are. Look to see what your child's eligible for. So one resource that I recommend is the CPS school profile page. And I will actually show you how to get there. I don't know about you, but I'm a visual person and hearing directions doesn't help. So if you actually go to cps.edu/schools, you can scroll down a little bit and you'll find the school profile search. So let's, for instance, look at Alcott. We can see that there's the elementary school, there's the high school, and then it asks me if I want Talcott. So we're going to click on Alcott College Prep High School. The first page is a nice at a glance. You can see the school rating. 1+ is the highest rating, and then 1, and then 2+, and so on. And this is based on things like standardized test scores, attendance. There's a survey that's administered generally every year to staff and students, and all of those factor into the rating. You can see how many students there are, a little bit of, at a glance information about demographics, things like that. All of that's pretty handy. The page that's the most helpful is the admissions page, I think, when you're doing research. It will here show you every program that they have at that school. New this year, just a couple months ago, they started listing how many applicants there were in round 1 and how many offers were given. So similar to if you Google a college, oftentimes they'll show the acceptance rate. Now you can calculate that acceptance rate yourself. So we can see for Alcott, for their general education program, we saw on the front page, maybe you may not have seen, they only have about, I think it was 320, 330 students. So they only gave 94 seats last year out of 1,317 applicants. You can see right here if there are application requirements. This is that eligibility piece. There aren't any for the general education program, and then it tells you exactly what selection is based on. So students are randomly selected by computerized lottery, but the lottery is conducted in a specific order. So they give preference to students who attended Alcott Elementary School, and then they give preference to students who have staff at that school, staff who have students, students who have staff who have a parent at that school, students who live within an overlay boundary, so kind of like that neighborhood boundary, and then a random general lottery. So it's really nice to have all of that right there. This is the only place that I know of where you can find it so clearly laid out. So then you can also see they have a pre-engineering program. You can see there are no application requirements, so there's no eligibility. And then this is a point-based system. Points are based on 7th grade final GPA and NWEA MAP scores. And then again, you can see they offer 42 seats out of 738 applicants. So I really, really like this page. I want to point out one thing, just because you might not be familiar. I'm trying to think of a school that has what I want to show you. Also new this year, they started listing our specialized, like special education classroom or programs. So anytime you see significantly modified curriculum or / moderate, that's a special ed program that you don't even have to worry about. That doesn't apply to any of our students right at this time. So, and then this is, for example, Linkin Park. So you can see just how many programs they have. They have drama. They have, and for those of you who are familiar with Linkin Park, they have an honors, double honors program, and they've changed the name of it to IB Middle Years Program Honors, Double Honors. So it is pretty much the same thing. They've just expanded access to some IB courses, like a la carte. So you can see all of these different options at Linkin Park. And so this would be, if your child was interested and eligible, that would be 5 of their 20 choice applications. So that's one really handy resource. Again, this is cps.edu/schools. It will be linked in the slide deck for you, so you don't have to worry about remembering that. And then I also really like the High School Bound website. I do have the students use it in some of our lessons. You can do research on the Go CPS website. I've just found that it's not super user-friendly, but High School Bound is. So let me show you what that looks like. So you can search by location. You can put in your address and see what's nearby. I always think that that's a good jumping off point for exploring. If you have a kid who doesn't know what they're interested in, let's face it, they're kids. They shouldn't know what they want to do with their lives. Most of them, some have a passion, but you don't know where to start. So I say, look to see what's close. Because an hour each way, but it's your dream school. Some kids 100% agree. Some kids 100% disagree. And you want to see, okay, so what are the options that are nearby, and think about that. When it's 19 degrees for 3 weeks in a row and there's 3 feet of snow, do you want to do 2 buses and a train ride? So you can put in your address, you can see what's nearby. For instance, let's see, I know I always talk about Amundsen and not a lot of people know about it. So let me find it. Where are you? There's Amundsen. So you can click on the school, learn more. They've got a link to the website. Some of them have videos, the address, all of that. They've got a little overview. And then you can look at things like academic interests. So what kind of language courses do they have? You can look at what sports and clubs they have. I talk about match and fit, which is also common with talking about college to high school students. Match is, do you have what the school is looking for in order to get an offer? But then fit is, does the school have what you want so that you get all of your needs fulfilled? Do they have the sport that you want to play? Do they have a club that's of interest to you? All of the schools all have honors courses. I think almost all of them have some kind of AP courses. So you're going to have, and they all have to meet the state graduation requirements. So they've got all of the classes at every high school. But do they have the things that are interesting to you? And I also tell them finding your niche is a good way to find your people. Your classes, you might have a different set of students in every single class. But if you can fall in with, let's say, the volleyball team, if that's your thing, then you already know you have something in common with them, and you're going to be seeing those same people all the time, and that's where you'll start to develop a bond. So looking at these things is really important. For you as the parent, you're probably really interested in school performance, so you can see all those statistics, attendance, the SAT average, college enrollment, graduation rate, all of that. Freshman on track is how likely students are. It's looking at their grades and how likely they are to finish in 4 years. School culture, some of that same profile information I was talking about. I always clarify to the kids, when it says yes for dress code, it doesn't mean that there's a uniform. I just point out, like, no, horse, there are things that you can and can't wear. That's a dress code. Let's see, they've got all the demographics here. And then they also list the eligibility requirements. So you can see that here also. Here's an explanation about that growth community for you. And then they break down IB, where all the points come from. So it's out of 900 points, half of it comes from grades, half of it comes from test score. This is really outdated. I have a more updated cutoff score for all of the IB programs. So again, high school bound, really great, nice, clear cut, a lot of the information you need, pretty user friendly. Go CPS is a great tool. I'll take the grade out. It's a tool too. And then the last place that I want to point out to you is my website, and I'll talk a little bit more about cutoff scores here. So my Google site is linked in my signature on all of my emails. It's also linked on the my Nettle Horse page. So if you ever need to find it, if you go to the high school planning page, I have grabbed all of the resources that I think are most useful. They're all on the Go CPS website too, but it can be hard to find them sometimes. So I've got high school research tools. So there's that Go CPS website, that high school bound website that I just showed you, the link to that CPS school profile search page. And then I also this year made a virtual bulletin board for all of those different virtual open houses that were happening. So those are all for research. There's information about the application process, which this first one might be good for FAQs, but some of the other ones I think are just a little too detailed for where you're at in the process right now. And they'll live here for when you're ready. If you want a peek, take a peek. Scoring rubrics then. Let's take a look at IB. So this is where those points come from when I say it's point-based selection. So if you're ever curious about where the points come from, you can look at these scoring rubrics. And so for IB program, it explains right here that there's a total of 900 points with half coming, or with each half being worth 450. Here it does explain that there are 50 bonus points for living in the attendance area of an IB program. But then when we come down to the bottom, you can see how everything converts to points. So if your child has a 90th percentile for reading on the MAP test, they'll get 205 points for that. If they have a 95th percentile for the math on the MAP, they'll get 216 points for that. So that's 421 points out of 450 so far. And then you can come down and see how many points they'd get for each final grade in reading, math, science, and social studies. So this is how you can kind of figure this out. And I am happy to sit down and do all the math with you. I do it nonstop when it's application time. So all of these most popular program type scoring rubrics I've pulled out for you right here. So IB, and then Lincoln, I need to change the name, double honors. They actually changed, they didn't announce that they changed the name, so that's why that happened. Selective Enrollment, the Sen Fine Arts has their own, and Service Leadership Academies, and Simeon. Actually, I grabbed all of the scoring rubrics. And then cutoff scores, I put those here for you. There's the one document for all the choice programs, one document for all the selective enrollment high schools, but then there's also a point calculator. So you can plug the numbers in and find out what your child's points are. And then there's also a IB point calculator. So I'll show you all those really quickly. So choice program. You can see they just list the name of the school, the name of the program, and how many points they were looking for last year. They're always subject to a little bit of change, but they don't tend to jump a whole lot from year to year. And then it looks pretty much the same thing for, well, now I will say it looks different. And I'll show you the selective enrollment because of the tiers, it looks different. So let's zoom in on this. And I'll explain what you're looking at. So if we're looking at the bottom here for Lane, for tier 4, which is most of the Nettlehorst community, last year the cutoff score, the minimum points they accepted were 862, and then they accepted students all the way up to 875 points. So on average, students had about 869 points if they were accepted. So you can see here how those points differ among the different tiers. Again, it's not that the other kids are I mean, I guess if they're getting an easier entry, but they're all competing against each other. So it's not like a student with a tier 1 is taking a seat from a student from a tier 4. They all have a certain number of seats set aside. So you can see that the numbers vary a little bit from school to school because they all get to set their own cutoff scores. So Lane, their cutoff score is the average was 869, and Whitney Young was higher at 878. Just to explain what all of that means when you're looking at it. As I mentioned, there is a selective enrollment calculator, so you don't have to go to the scoring rubric and hand calculate, although that's also an option. But you scroll down, 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 and you put in right here your child's percentiles. Let's say you have 90th, 95th, all A's, and your tier 4. If you hit calculate, it'll show you how many points your child is going to get out of 300 for their NWA scores, how many points out of 300 they're getting for their 7th grade final grades. And then so far they have 580 points. So that means that to meet last year's cutoff scores, they would have to get on the selective enrollment test, let's say for Lane, in order to be likely to get an offer, they'd have to get between 282 to 295 out of a possible 300 points. So possible, but your child would have to score really well on that selective enrollment test. Okay, even less of a margin of error for Whitney Young, because as you can see, they'd have to get between 292 and 303 points, and the maximum is 300. So if we were to look at like Northside, it is rather unlikely that that child would get an offer because they would need at least 308 points, but the most they can get is 300. So that's what all of this is. And then very last thing that I will show you, and then I will stop talking for a little while before your brains are fried, is this IB cut score calculator. So this was updated this year with the scores that they could find. So you can then come in and put in, just in the gray fields, put in what your student has. So let's say, again, 90th percentile, 95th percentile, all A's, and then no for living in the area. And then you can see how many points your child has for IB. So 871. And then you can come over here and look at the different cutoff scores. So looking at this, you can see that that child would be likely to be admitted to just about any IB program that they applied to. So those are all the resources that are on my website. Most of them can be found on the GoCPS website. I just wanted to bring them all in one place for you. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to open it up for questions. If you don't have questions, if your brain is just swirling, that is totally fine. I will do another one of these next year. I also email out, you'll get emails from the district really regularly. I will also send those emails just in case, and then any other insider info that I get. So you'll be hearing from me probably every other week in 8th grade. And I'm going to do a lesson with students still this year, and I do another one in the fall of 8th grade. So no need to have questions now, but if you do, shoot. Yeah. You're welcome, and I'm glad it's helpful. I know it's a lot, it's a huge process, but I'm here with you. It's most of my fall, so we can Google Meet, we can, if we're able to, meet in person, email me, whatever you need. Give a second in case any of you are thinking and typing. You're super welcome. Thanks for dealing with the internet outages. Appreciate you hanging in there. You're welcome. All right, well, if nobody has any questions, go enjoy your nights, and I'm sure that we'll be seeing each other soon. You're welcome. Bye, everybody.